All right, everybody. Hello and welcome. I'm Ethan Evans. I'm the Easy Coach, and tonight I have a guest here with me, Kristin. She's here as a part of our ongoing coaching series, and I'm going to scoot over a little to get out from behind her window. We'll go over Kristin's background in just a minute, but thank you all for coming. I want to do a few announcements. Remember, on this show tonight, when we're doing one-on-one coaching, we don't use the Q&A widget too much on the screen. If you do have input or items to share with Kristin, thoughts about what I'm advising her, by all means, please jump in. Drop them in chat. I'll read them off if I get a chance. Kristin is looking forward to getting advice from more than just me. And let's see, we have a couple other things I want to talk about. I want to foreshadow that at the end of tonight's broadcast, I'm going to have a surprise reveal of an upcoming show that I think could be one of the most exciting we've done. So if you stick around to the end, you'll get a free preview. So with that, Kristin is the other half of the pair with Mugendra, where I'm going to do multi-month long-term coaching of someone who wants to develop and someone who's brave enough to come on screen and on stream and share, in this case, her development areas and what she'd like to know more about, and her career. So I really appreciate that. I also want to point out, in case anybody hasn't noticed, that I ended up selecting a woman and an Indian man for two people to coach. And I did that, number one, because they were the best applicants, but number two, very gleefully when they turned out to be great applicants, because this stream has a ton of female viewers and a ton of international viewers. And I want to make clear I do career development for everyone. And I think as a white male, I've come to realize I love white males. There's nothing wrong with that. But we have a lot of advantages. We have a lot of, at least in America, we have a lot of things going for us, a lot of opportunity. And so I'll maybe say more about that another time, but I just want to make clear that, this stream is for everyone. It's for everyone who's polite and who's trying to develop themselves and grow in their career. So without further ado then, Kristin, take a minute, tell us a little bit about your education and background and what brought you to apply. What made you interested?
So I like to read a lot, and I know you were mentioning, I think in the last stream, one of your learning methods is reading books. So that's kind of where I'm at. I do a lot of that, but sometimes I feel like you need to maybe take it a step further, and I'm a verbal processor. So I really enjoy having contact and kind of talking through stuff. So coaching is an area that I've enjoyed in the past. And after following and like pretty much binge watching your streams, reading a couple of these lovely books that you've been suggesting,
Nice. My
I
two
just got super
favorites.
excited.
You just
I
held
know,
up my
right?
two favorites. All right. Way to go.
Yeah. So I was like, man, this is a perfect opportunity, and I don't know, it's the next step, right? So
Right.
taking it beyond the books is kind of like
Beyond the
path.
books. I like that.
Yeah.
Beyond the books. All right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit your education. Like what'd
Okay.
you major in? What'd you do in college?
Sure.
How long have you been in the work world?
So I went into college thinking I wanted to be like a creative, realized I don't really have those hard skills to be a painter or, whatever. So I went the marketing route because I thought, hey, marketing and advertising, that's creative. I like photography, I don't know, kind of like a lot of college students didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so through that, kind of learning more about business, being forced to take finance and accounting and economics and all those classes that I didn't really want to take. And I ended up, I've actually used some of them, which blows my mind. I never thought that would happen. Yeah, I got this degree, and then shortly after, I got married and I moved, and I didn't know anybody, didn't have any connections anywhere. So I started out in a CPA firm, working there and kind of just doing anything and everything, from like running the front desk to bookkeeping. But it wasn't really where I wanted to be. So I started kind of like digging into what can I do? What are my skills? And as you'll learn, throughout the conversation, that it's hard to define because I've realized my greatest strengths are kind of in my soft skills. So I was trying to figure out what that could possibly be, and I was looking at like account executives and client management, stuff like that. Found this weird title called digital producer. Went that route. I kind of looked at all the award submissions that different agencies had. I liked some, and I applied at all the places that had work that I liked, that I thought I could contribute, and I liked the culture of. So I worked there for a while as a digital producer, which is essentially project management, client management, team management. Had a really good time. It was a super small company. I was the ninth person hired. So I got to grow with it and a lot of influence, which is one of my motivators I've come to learn. So then I had my first child and took a break. Couldn't take a break for too long because apparently I'm too driven to just not be working. So I started freelancing. And I had some previous clients from the agency that had kind of moved around, and I started working with different agencies in town. And even some, I was working with one up in Vancouver, which was really cool. And started contracting for a company that then didn't want me to stop working for them. And I kept telling them, no, I'm not going to be full time. I will contract if you want. But somehow they persuaded me to join the team. And that's where I'm at now. So awesome. I'm a product manager, which in most industries is actually more like a product owner role. We have the terms flipped for some weird reason. So I was doing that for the website and a little bit for our app. And now I'm moving into a different area. So I don't have an actual dedicated team right now. We're in a lot of strategy phase, and I'm kind of working just lockstep with my product owner, and we're figuring out where we're going to take things. So lots of work to be done there. It's a fairly large company, and I'm learning new people and new acronyms every day because it's in healthcare, which is not something that I've had experience in, and meeting a lot of important people. So in terms of like doctors, and man, their life is crazy. But so yeah, so that's the space that I'm in now. And I've been there for about a year and looking to see what I can influence and help change and what my role is. I'm really dedicated to building a healthy culture and growing teams, both on an individual basis, trying to help them be the best them. I think that creates a better product, and then trying to, build great products. So
what type of products, can you say a little bit about what type of products you build?
Like I said, I was previously on the Sure. I was on the web. The website was one product. Okay. I did a little bit of work on our app, and then we split it out. We ended up going native. So kind of shifted and divided that. I was overseeing both, and then we separated those into two different projects. So right now, what I'm doing is I don't know what my products are going to be yet, but it could be anything that is going digital stuff in healthcare, right? There's a bazillion options. Everybody's doing it. Digital transformation is like the buzzword of the year. So figuring out ways to make the doctors' lives better and the patients' lives better. So
that sounds
it could
good.
be anything. It could be Alexa, right? Yeah. We really are actually looking at voice. That's one of the explorations that falls under my portfolio. So
yep. My doctor's office.
Lots of fun stuff.
My doctor's office just told me the next time I check in, I need to do it like they're going to text me, and I need to reply to the text or go to the app. So, because they don't want to talk to you at the front desk anymore. They just, they're trying.
Maybe they just don't.
No, they were clear. Like they were clear about it. Like check, like just having you check in isn't very high value, but they still need you to like say you're there. So I got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. So before the show, Kristin shared with me, we got on and talked for just a few minutes before the show, and she has a ton of tough questions. And as everybody in this audience knows, I like tough questions that make me think, because that way I learn something too, and all of you who are watching learn something. So rather than like mess around with it, she has a list of like 5 topics. I'll let her pick one, and we'll jump right into it and see if she can put me on the spot here. And T
Okay.
Weirdo 3, one of our common visitors in chat is all about use, giving me something hard to work on. So, what would you like to talk about first?
Okay. Um, sure. I don't know. I mean, any and all, right? Let's see. Okay, we'll start with an easier one.
Oh, all right,
Maybe it's easier. And
all right.
it's not one that I mentioned to you right before we
Oh,
started
great!
talking.
So it's easy
Um,
but a surprise.
yeah, I
Fantastic.
have a question for you.
Okay.
Something that I've done I've been noticing and I'm noodling on it and it kind of has been driving me crazy is like so when so you're an executive, right? And I'm
Hmm.
sure there's times where you have to get up and walk out of a meeting. And I'm just curious on like what protocol or like what should be suggested and how to handle that because for me it's deflating when you're like you're getting this chance to interact with these people on your leadership team and then like they get up and they might miss your entire piece of that meeting because you only have this much of it. And so I was just curious like from your standpoint, and I've read some stuff that on how to handle that, but I was just wondering from your own experience, like your thoughts on that.
Ooh. So specifically,
Was it
if
easier?
yeah, that's good. If you're part of a meeting with an executive or a group of other people, and I just want to check if the lead executive leaves or if one person leaves. Like, what are you thinking about? The person. Tell me a little more context, because
Um,
how I would handle it varies
like
slightly.
if you're the VP and you have
Yeah.
some directors in the room and
Yeah.
some managers, and then you have some product managers,
Right.
and we're going like doing a round table or
Right.
something where everybody's giving their piece of the
Right.
puzzle and hoping that if there's any insight that needs to be shared, that you're getting that information because this might be the only time you interface
Mm-hmm.
for a whole week or
Yep.
whatever. And so
Yeah. Or a
making sure
month
you're
even.
aligned.
Yep. Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so the first thing is, yeah, it's everyone wants to be heard and seen, right? It's part of how we value ourselves. And to not feel heard or seen is deflating. Like, there's no question about that. At the
Mhm.
same time, it does arise. There's 2 types of problems, and I'm more guilty of one than the other. But one of them is an executive or leader has to leave the room, and another one is they pull out their phone and you're pouring out your life story about your project, and they're reading email, or for all you know, texting their significant other or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple ways to handle this. One way is it depends on whether or not, honestly, what you're saying directly involves them or not. If it's more
Mm-hmm.
direct, I would suggest there's 2 tactics. One is just pause, just go silent and wait for them. If that's not appropriate or a little too much, you can also say, "Do
Not a
you
little
need?"
passive aggressive, maybe
Uh,
a little bit passive aggressive.
well, I am. I've been accused of all kinds of things, but being passive aggressive is rarely one of them. I'm usually accused of being aggressive, which is not a positive trait, by the way. Assertive is good, aggressive not as good. Um, but I think what you do there, it really comes. Yeah, T Weirdo here in chat says pregnant pause. Right, it's more just the like little bit give a second, and you can say it's passive aggressive, but it can also just be polite because remember, phones are incredibly good at
Mm-hmm.
distracting us, and a lot of us, including
Mm-hmm.
me, are like Pavlov's dog, and when the phone lights up, we pick it up because it might be important. But the ways to handle it, basically, number one, if it's a big meeting and there's a bunch of different leaders there, I say you just carry on. It's unfortunate they've stepped out during what you're doing or are distracted in what you're doing, but you just carry on and do your job well. And people, by the way, you may not think so, and this, if it's happening to you, you'll now feel more deflated. Um, but we ignore the people who are less interesting to us, and whether we do it consciously or not, the people who have something to say, we pay attention and listen, and we have pretty good filters for it. And the people that tend to ramble is when we grab the phone. So I would say you're a marketer, or you have been a marketer, and you like marketing. Make sure that when you're presenting, you're crisp and to the point, and people will pay more attention. Um, but the other thing you can do is, so let me take a step back. If an executive is good, they will not leave without saying why or when they'll be back, or what should happen in their absence. So if I have to step out, and I can step out for a minute quickly, I just do it. But if I'm going to be gone, I will say, like, I have to leave for a minute, something's come up, Susan will take over, or anyone with actions that I need to know about, email them to me. Um, this is good. There's an acronym in chat called BLOT. I've not heard this, but I like it. Bottom line on top, which is lead with the bottom line. Like, get it. It's also called not burying the lead. So if you have a point, say, whatever, Project Foo is behind 3 weeks. I'm going to discuss why, and then we'll talk what we're going to do about it. But you've put out there right up top that Project Foo is behind 3 weeks. So you have a range of possible responses here. The other thing you might do, honestly, is if you have any relationship with that executive, you just ask them and say, hey, I know you sometimes have to leave, but I'm not sure whether I should continue. If you want to hear what we have to say, should we pause the meeting? You get a sense of it, and by bringing it up, they probably won't leave again. It's easy for an executive not to realize. Go ahead.
So, okay, so for me, it's not even always happening to me. It just happens. And I have super high empathy. That's so I see the new hire we just bring in, and then they're wanting that moment to be able to show value, and then it's just taken from them. And I don't know, there's a part of me that whenever I start feeling this, I'm okay, first of all, where am I deriving my self-worth from? Because if I feel the need to have this interaction, I have to say something to feel good about my experience here. I don't want to have to always say something to feel like I'm contributing, because maybe I don't have anything that's that valuable to say in that meeting, and that's okay.
Right.
But when you're not in a higher level, and you want to prove your value, it's hard, I think, sometimes to recognize that and let it go. And so that's one thing that's always top of mind. But then the other is just the fact that we don't have a lot of opportunity to build relationships,
Right.
And for me, one of my goals right now, my personal goals, that I noted when I sent in an application, is to help kind of build this bridge between leadership and associates. Because I know that a lot of places, everywhere you go, there's, you can always get better. So I'm kind of looking for opportunities to help do that. And I feel like that's an area that I recognize as potentially impacting our culture more than maybe we would care to admit. And so just wondering what the best path would be for that. And I think that it might just be a conversation, but not everybody would be comfortable having that conversation. And then how you go about it makes a difference, I'm sure.
Yes, I guess I would say there is no one best way. Something you may not have heard me say, or you may have found in one of my videos, is what I call my chameleon theory of leadership or management. And so you're nodding like you've heard me talk about it, which is good.
Yeah.
But basically,
adaptability.
Different people have different styles. And so you do have to adapt to the style of the leader you're trying to influence. Right. Somebody, chat, Ojo4 says, know your audience. So you've got to tune your message to them. And then there's a number of techniques you can use. For example, when everybody's just sitting down, if you have a new hire in the room, you can introduce them. Say, hey, I just wanted to let
Mm-hmm.
everybody know we have Alfred here today. Alfred joined us on Tuesday, and this is his first meeting, and he's going to talk to us about Project Foo. And then he's like been given the stage, and you can do that. See, even if you're junior in the room, it's hard for people to be like, well, Kristin shouldn't be interrupting us to introduce new hires. It's hard to bag on that, right? Like, oh, what a terrible
Yeah.
act. And
Yeah, I don't
so,
think anyone
right.
would.
And so, but that gives you a chance to call attention to them. Um, and the other thing I think chat says here that you should think about is you are setting yourself up for a very heavy lift. You're taking on your shoulders not only caring for yourself and your role and being
Hmm.
relatively new to the company, but the corporate culture and all the new hires and everybody else. Um,
Hmm.
and realize also, while some of them may want their moment in the sun, some of them may be secretly grateful that the executive's out of the room. Like, just make sure you don't project your desires when you're.
Yeah,
Not everybody
that's
wants
a
that
good
spot,
call.
right? All of
Hmm.
us make the mistake, certainly including me, by the way, that what we want for ourselves must be what everybody else wants. And there's a reason for that.
Hmm.
Psychologically, we want it for ourselves, and so we think it's a great thing. And if we admit that maybe you don't want what I want, then that's admitting that there's something else and that I may have made a wrong choice or that your choice might be better. And if you don't have a lot
Yeah.
of confidence, you can't tolerate the fact that, different strokes for different folks, it's actually threatening to think that someone else can not want what you want. Um,
Yeah.
and I love that you want to build the culture. I just say, uh, consider that not everyone has your same energy for that. And
Yeah.
I encourage you to do it, but go a little bit slowly, or make sure you take the temperature of what people are after,
Yeah.
because not everyone has your
So
energy for culture.
I will say I've been definitely taking the temperature, and I've found, um, well, this has just always been the way it is in my life, really. Like, I tend to, people gravitate to share things with me. And I like to ask questions and, not to like stir the pot in a negative way, but in that can be a challenge too. Like when you're always feeling like the squeaky wheel and just trying to figure out that balance. To be, doing something that's productive, not something that's going to increase negativity or, making it a toxic environment, trying to take some of those potentially negative emotions that someone might have and helping them be able to talk about it, and get it off their chest, but not like let it turn into something that's going to grow and fester. Um, so that tends to be, I do get a lot of that feedback before I kind of make those assumptions. But I think that it's a really great call to say, like, you got to remember, maybe not everybody actually wants that same thing. So I got
Right,
to
right.
figure out a way to, get that as one of the lenses that I'm looking through.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting. Like, I did a stream very similar to this internally today at my workplace at Amazon, and super interesting opportunity. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the show. But maybe 1/10 of the people in the workplace show up and are interested, and I can either look
mhm,
at that as like 90% of them are missing out, or that just it's not the right thing for the other 90%. Um,
yeah.
but like where, for example, I want to project on you is you're so into people. There's this soundtrack in my head already, which is she should just go into management. If she wants to work with people and culture all the time, she should go into because that's what I've done. And so I pattern match, and I'm like, here's someone who's
Hmm.
super people oriented, but you can be super people oriented and yet not want to be a
Yeah.
manager or a leader in that way. So that's me
I
exemplifying.
mean,
Yeah.
and that's an exact question that I have, right? I have a potential opportunity that could come up. I don't, who knows when, but the
Sorry,
last.
I have to acknowledge chat here real quick. Yes,
Yeah.
Kyle, you nailed it. I put in the new mystery item in the background. It's the kettlebell. So, all
Great. So
right.
finally someone played your game.
No,
That's great.
they play it. You know, well, you have to train Twitch what you're up to, and so you just mess around, and it's actually the kettlebell was there last week, but it was our last show, but it was behind the Zoom window, so I had to move it down to be visible. So anyway, back to you, Krista. So you have a management opportunity. Fantastic! It's
Yeah.
promotion time already.
I just, but I'm like, my concern is, um, what I expect out of management might be different, right? Like, I really think that managers need to be hyper focused on the growth of the people, and I'm not interested in being an individual contributor and a manager of people. Like, I don't want to be responsible for the health of this, project or this product, um, directly, like the work. I don't want to be managing the work. I want to be managing the people who are growing to be responsible, who I can teach to take over, decision making on a continuum, and have more empowerment for them to make the decisions, and so that I wouldn't have to be saying yes or no or anything like that all the time. And but I'm concerned that, like, maybe that's, I don't know, maybe what if it doesn't look like that, and then I get stuck and I feel like the only way out is to leave, or like take a, I wouldn't want to feel like I'm demoting myself if I get into management and then I feel like the requirement isn't what I expect out of it. I guess it's all about setting expectations, but yeah, that's another question that we can probably explore over the next few months,
Okay.
because
All right. Well, let me ask you
um
first, how could you try to find out? So, if I understood you correctly, your concern is that as a manager, you might be asked to manage and direct work with a lot of your time, leaving you relatively less time to
to be
invest
a
in
manager.
people, um, and that you might not like that. So, how could you figure that out in advance? Leading
Yeah,
question.
I mean, well, I've been paying attention to the way it's set up now. Um, and I think that some stuff would need to change probably. So definitely I'm already having some of those conversations around what it would look like. But you never really know, I think, until, because sometimes, you get into things and everyone's like, yeah, we all agree, we all align on this. And then somebody else higher up says, hey, we have to do this work. And then they say, well, we don't have budget to hire somebody else. So, like, we need you to take this work. And then you're in that awkward position where you're like, well, that's not, we kind of agreed that as this, in this specific management role, we were going to focus on the people, and now I'm being asked to take on the work. I can't really say no. I mean, I could, I guess, but it might not bode well for me.
Right.
I don't know. I'm like totally inventing this up. This might never even happen, like this path, but this is like, these are the things that I think about. I overthink.
You do think a lot. You do what I call borrowing trouble, which I do too,
Yeah.
by the way. Right? You don't actually have trouble yet, but you're imagining trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Clemens, right? Mark Twain has a quote that goes something like, "My life has had a great many troubles, most of which never happened." And he was great at imagining trouble, and I am too. What I would say though is bad news. Managers are expected to work, and I work all the time, and then I manage. I do things like this at night. So I do coach, but I have to coaching and growing my people is what I do around my productive work as defined by Amazon. And I would say most companies are now like that. Um,
Yeah.
and so your company might be some mysterious exception, but unless you have proof they're an exception, you will be expected to do lots and lots of work and then also manage and grow your people. And so if that's not a fit for you right now, then maybe what you're doing, which is be an individual contributor and help some people out, is a better fit for you. So that's my guess.
Yeah.
All right, what else is on your
Yeah,
since we got into hypotheticals there? When you're ready, let's pick one of your
we
concrete
did.
today
Yeah.
problems that we can talk about that I can
Um,
help you today. Not that I don't love to talk
I will.
theory.
No, no, it's cool. I will say I've recently learned someone at a conference heard me talking about the things I'm passionate about and talking about mentorship and how the challenges of finding a mentor. And and they were listening to all the things I like to do, and they were like, "It sounds like you are basically wanting to do exactly like this role that we've just started testing out." And it was with like Chase Bank, which is huge. So I can't believe they're testing this out, but they are testing out a role that's essentially like a manager. They call it area team lead, and their like schedule is basically all one-to-ones, and it's managing people and it's growing people and it's making sure that you don't have burnout. It's making sure people are in the right roles. It's making sure you're doing whatever you can to grow that team and invest in that team. And it does sound really exciting. But I love the people I'm working with. So I don't want to. I'm not going to like jump ship, but it is interesting. I've kind of seen some other people starting to test that out and do it. So we'll see.
I'm sure there are definitely places that have those roles, and that's fantastic. It's I just say it's not the norm I've seen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
So
that's okay.
okay.
You can
So
hunt it out. But let's jump to one of your
okay.
other
Well,
topics.
see, look, everything one thing to the next.
We'll go deeper.
I
I'm not
I
trying to
will
hurry you
say,
along. I just thought maybe getting to
no, you're
something that's real that you're dealing with
um.
right now.
Well, I will. I want to give a little bit more background
Okay.
to so that as we talk through this stuff, you can kind of see some of my perspective. So I have always, like I said, I've been leveraging a lot of my soft skills, right?
Okay.
Um, and so looking into potential like career paths, I've come across things like industrial organizational psychology and operations management and coaching and consulting and um, a whole bunch of those things. And then I read this book called Fierce Conversations
Mm-hmm.
by, I think, Susan Scott. I don't know if you ever read that one.
Yep. I
And I
know
was
of it.
like, yeah, like those are the things I want. That's what I want to do. And so now looking at where I'm at and figuring out how to, gain the experience and sharpen the skills that I have to move towards that direction, which I'm still like fuzzy on, right? I don't really understand exactly how that looks because all those things like happen in different roles and in different industries. And so it's kind of hard. It's not like I can just say, I want this discipline. It's not really, um, uh, it's not really like the management position or I want to be a VP of this or it's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit different.
Yep.
So I have a lot of paths to get there and I'm trying to hone in on sharpening some of the skills as I work to clarify what it is I want to do.
Yep.
Um, so that would be why one of the things that's on my list is to start learning how to take incremental steps in subtle leadership. And subtle for a couple of reasons. So one being that I feel like if I need to step in because there's chaos and lead, I can do that. I've done it. I know that I'm capable of doing it. Where I would like to get better is that quiet wisdom that you get generally just from a lot of experience. And not having to let like the emotions run, right? Just being able to listen, take it in, and like I just think that would be a good practice for me. And then also because I'm not in an actual leader, like I'm not a defined leader, right, in my role right now. So I have to really watch and balance. I think maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me, but how I'm leading, where I'm trying to lead, where I speak up, where I stay quiet. Um, that's something I'm wanting to kind of grow in. So like any advice on incremental steps or thoughts on subtle leadership? What have you seen any really great examples or really poor examples that kind of help speak to that?
Yeah. Um, so I have. It's not my forte, right? I am not a subtle leader, but like you, I aspire to be more of one. So I have looked into it some. Have you seen the show I did maybe 2 months ago now with a guy named Ken Meyer? Um,
I saw a couple of the clips from it,
okay.
but I
So
didn't watch the whole thing through.
yeah, so Ken has a really hard job, which is he's an interim CEO. And so what that means is he goes into companies that have lost their CEO and he serves until they hire a replacement. And so that job's hard in a couple ways. One way it's hard is people know from the minute he shows up that he's leaving. So it can be hard to lead when people know that you're not there for the long term. They can ignore you. They can just wait you out. They can do all kinds of things if they don't agree. So that's a problem, right? That's a challenge.
Mhm.
And chat liked the show. They're saying they watched it several times. Um, but the other thing is he pointed out to me, and it's in that show, he recommended a book called Humble Inquiry. Um,
Okay,
and
yeah, I think I've heard of that.
yeah, and so it was a short book, so I went ahead and read it, and it was very challenging to me because it's the area I suck. And I do. I like to tell. Um, and
Hmm.
that book is all about leading through questions. And it's not leading through leading questions like rhetorical questions, it's leading through honest
Yeah.
inquiry. Um, and just so I think humble influence comes from being, you can read the book, but part of it comes from being legitimately interested and then just asking for more, asking for more. And I'm so hardwired as a problem solver that geometry lesson for everyone. Most people would say uh, 2 points define a line. It takes 3 points to define a plane. I'm perfectly willing to envision the plane once I have the first 2 points. And that's the reverse of what he's talking about, which is I'm like, oh, you've said two things. I've got it. I'm ready to go.
Hmm.
And so I think the secret, which I'm laboring with, is to ask more questions. Um, and so we'll try that here. Do you have a role model or someone that you've seen that you think embodies what you're looking for? Whether public figure or, that leads in that way.
Yeah. I mean, we could go with a fictional route with what's his name from Leadership and Self-Deception.
Right, the main
Yeah, I don't
character.
know. Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, like I guess I feel like I've seen it, but nothing's coming to mind that sticks out. It's like that um you don't have to be for anyone that's led leadership and self-deception, you can be out of the box and still be like strong and still,
Yep.
you don't
Yep. You don't have to
and
be
I
a
guess
wimp.
this yeah, and I think that so I've read some interesting things lately on how like for a man to say I don't really know much about this, like it can come across as like relational, and for a woman to say it in leadership it might come across as like inept. And I haven't necessarily experienced a ton of that, but like I am aware of it.
Yeah.
And that's just so it's like I'm trying to think if I've met any women that I've seen this embodied by, because I generally am picturing like that, you know, that older guy who's real quiet. And you never really know what he's thinking about. He could be thinking about his, what he's going to eat for breakfast. He could be thinking about something major. Like you just can't read them, sort of thing. Like that's kind of what I envision that looks like, and I don't think I'm going to be that any day. So,
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
uh, maybe don't construct a false ideal for yourself. In that there are lots of effective leaders, the quiet, humble leader you aspire to is one form. And I think it's a good one. And I've talked about, you've obviously seen my chameleon model. I think being adaptive, some people don't do very well with being told. There are others that like a more directive style. But I think the reason I ask about that sort of model is one way you can improve is just study role models. And so I'll give you a different way to look at it. You can at least study other leaders you see and think about what you would do differently or what you think you would do differently and try it out. So when you see leaders, you can not only listen to them for what you need to for your job, but you can think about, okay, how do I like to be led? How do I want to lead? What can I borrow from this person's style and what would I change? And speaking less, I'll say for a minute, I've shared this maybe before on the stream, but I go to a fair number of meetings, not a lot, but some with Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon. And he has to speak last in meetings now. It used to be when I first joined the company, he kind of joined the conversation. But now, as like richest man in the world and CEO of one of the most successful companies, even very, very senior people, once he starts talking, they just shut up and listen and do what he says. And I'm pretty sure you could say, take off your shoes and hang them off your ears and put the laces in your mouth. And a number of people in the room would do it not because they're sycophants, not because they're just like suck ups, but because they'd assume, well, he's the smartest guy. There must be a reason we need to wear our shoes.
Yeah.
So what he has to do is literally sit around in the room and encourage the discussion, but give no opinions. So what that is, though, actually, is a little bit of what you're talking about, because everybody knows Jeff will eventually speak. And so when he does, it even sharpens it more in a way.
Right.
And so a way to have that humble leadership is to invite the opinions of others. Something I've seen done more and more in Twitch. Twitch internally has done some good education about how difficult it is to be on the phone. They've done some education about how it's difficult to be on the phone in a meeting. And so one thing they'll do is they'll reach out to the people on video or phone first and say, does anyone on the phone have anything to add? Or would someone on the phone like to go first? And that's just another way to have that sort of we're listening to everyone approach. So
yeah. I will say I've like recently tried, because I like to jump and give answers too.
Yeah.
And so I've recently tried to be like, I'm sure I work with a lot of smart people. I'm sure other people have the same conclusion or a better one. And so I've been trying to like reserve and like not always be the first or not always feel that need to like share my answer. And I've been like very pleasantly surprised at like other people that maybe are a little more introverted or just less likely to speak up, and giving them that, just literally just not saying something, like not awkward silence, but just not saying it first, like allow that space. So I feel like that's been a good practice for me, one that I probably should continue. But yeah, that makes sense. Just doing a better job at making sure you have that space for other people.
Yeah, though that's that kind of leadership that makes you an enabler in the room, because you can become a little bit the traffic director in a room without being in charge, the facilitator. And a program manager or product manager often is in that facilitator, like you have the microphone by default and you can hand it around, and that can empower others. I would say something for chat I learned about Kristin when I was getting to know her, talking to her to set up this stream. she reads a lot. And I actually, side question, when do you sleep? Because you have two kids and you're Eastern time zone. So you talk to me at 11 and you said that's a great time for you. And you read and you work. Are you one of those magical people that doesn't need a lot of sleep?
Oh, no.
Okay. Uh,
No, I'm tired all the time.
okay, that's the other version. There are
Yeah,
two versions.
I
There's the people who are magical and don't need a lot of sleep, and there's the people who are exhausted. Uh,
there's no magic. There's just a lot of coffee in the morning and knowing that this is a temporary season, right? And
yeah.
everything changes. So
All right.
that's
Good.
what gets me through.
Good.
Yeah. So
Good.
I won't be reading tonight because I'm talking to you
Yeah.
tonight, but maybe tomorrow.
All right. Well, since you chew through books so quickly, a book you might find interesting to understand people who are a little different than you is called Quiet. And Quiet is just about introverts and how introverts are drowned out in our current culture. So much like Humble Inquiry, which is shorter,
Hmm.
Quiet is talking about how introverts get run over and forgotten a lot. And it's really interesting. I would share with everyone. Um, the book Quiet points out that our culture didn't used to be that way. And so, whether you're pro or con, I'm not getting into, but if you think about the persona of our president, he's very uh, dominate the conversation. And if you go back in history, the book Quiet would pin that time frame on Dale Carnegie and win friends and influence people. Basically, the idea that um, uh, Dale Carnegie is the first person who sort of started the official shift of our culture to a salesy culture where you're trying to literally, where the goal is win friends and influence people. Now, in the late 1800s, it was different. And people who didn't have much to say were considered not shy or retiring or inhibited, but instead contemplative, thoughtful, noble, reserved. They were positive words. And now they've turned around. So, long story short, the book Quiet might be another interesting book. Not maybe, I wouldn't recommend it as highly as Humble Inquiry, partly because I like
Okay.
to recommend short books because not everybody has your enthusiasm for reading.
I
Um,
like short books too.
yeah, yeah. But, well, this will be truth, right? I read part of Quiet and all of Humble Inquiry because Quiet was too long for me. Um, well, limited time, right? So, anyway,
Hmm.
um, uh, those are other tools, but trying to build that influence. I do have one point for you with all the goals you have. This was playing on my mind earlier. Bill Gates has a quote I've used on the stream before, which is most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And you're very early in your career. Don't feel that you have to perfect all your skills and build your team members up and be a new parent and all this year. If you make progress on all of them, it will pay off. And so, as a divergence, a little bit, um, people don't know this. I may have talked about it a little bit on the stream, but I planned out starting the Easy Coach for a full year before I did it. Um, and I inched my way towards it. I came up with the idea, and then I talked to some people about what I was thinking about, and then I tested it by doing streams internal to Twitch and internal to Amazon on internal technology. And then I ran some pilot streams where I didn't advertise them and I only invited friends so I'd have a safe audience and blah, blah, blah. And that's just a small example. The point is, you can have a little patience with yourself and be strategic and
Hmm.
say, if I become this great coach or mentor or consultant 3 years from now, I'll still have like
Yeah.
30 working years to do that. It's okay. Um,
Yeah. Yes, you're right. And I do like to expedite these things, but no, I mean I get that. I want to make sure I'm never complacent, you
Yep.
know. That's what
Uh,
I don't. So it's again striking that balance between like being okay with where I'm at, but like not so okay that I'm not striving and growing. And so
Completely.
figuring out
All right.
how to grow.
I'm super. That's a very healthy perspective. So I think that is a very healthy way to look at it, which is be comfortable in your own skin, but still wanting to improve. And if you achieve that, or if you have that balance, you're actually doing fantastically well. Because most people don't like themselves, honestly. They're always trying to cover up for some perceived hole or inadequacy, whether it's appearance or money or
Mhm.
job or whatever. And so if you have that, fantastic. Um,
Well, I wouldn't say I necessarily have it all all together, but I would say that's what I'm striving for. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah.
All right. So we have a few more minutes. Do you want to hit up one more thing, or do you have a question or follow up on anything we've
Looking at
talked about?
my lovely notes here.
I love how organized you are, by the way. I appreciate that. No, I
Sure.
say this, I tell people if you're going to have a coach, whether me or somebody else, put in the work, invest in it, and you'll get more out of it. And obviously you're doing that. So have at it.
So, one of the things that I'm not great at and is leveraging data, and especially in the sense of proving value that I provide because I can't really measure. I don't know how to measure soft skills. Like, I don't know how do you measure building relationships? How do you measure being adaptable? How do you measure having, you know, just being able to gauge, like read the room, that sort of thing. And then when you go to start implementing cultural change, how do you measure that? Like when you're helping lead that. And so I'm not sure that I'm asking directly, like, how would you measure that? If you have an answer, that'd be awesome. But just in general, I'm trying, and I've been doing this a little bit, like going back to the data, just trying to make sure that whenever I'm speaking to things, I can back it up and with data. But it's just hard for me to do that, and so I'm trying to find smaller ways that I can start making that a discipline in my life. So like I'm not I fight discipline. I don't like having to get up at the same time every morning. I don't want to be forced into things. I hate running. Like I'm not a person who likes to go exercise. Like discipline is something I want to be growing, and this is an area that I think I could become more disciplined in. So I don't know, just I read Decisive, and it's got a lot of good tips, but just how do I go about ideas from you or from Chad on how to start implementing data, I
Okay.
guess, leveraging it,
Well, chat.
or like
There's
tripwires or
your
something.
interactive question for the night. So, Kristen's looking for more help than just me on this. So if you have good suggestions, send them in. Extra Q said emotional intelligence slash EQ, and that's what you do. That's what you're trying to build. But EQ isn't something that's really tested or measured directly. What I think is
Mm-hmm.
tested in a culture, there are metrics that reflect on soft skills. Now, we can talk about discipline in a second, but metrics that reflect on soft skills, things like turnover. Uh, a team can have higher
Mm-hmm.
or lower turnover than another team. Now, it has to be measured over time. Another thing a team can have is I don't know if your company does something like an annual employee survey of any kind. So
Mm-hmm.
some companies do like an
We do.
engagement survey that's then broken out by
Mm-hmm.
team. And so team scores, uh, generally those are attributed to the manager, but whether it's acknowledged to you or not, you can know that if your team's scoring really well, you may have some part in that. Another piece is peer feedback. And so, do you have
Mm-hmm.
you've been there a year, so do you know, does your company have a 360 review process? Like where you collect peer feedback or ask for.
We yeah, and we just kind of started reshaping our performance like evaluations and kind of going down a whole new path for those. So, uh, Sorry, it says internet connection is unstable. Sorry
Yep,
about that.
I think that may be on my end for some reason that the internet connection's struggling. Although that would be weird. It means the kids are watching a lot of stuff in the background. Um, House full of kids, all well trained on digital technology, has its consequences.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I killed some stuff here, and we'll see if it works out. Somebody says they reloaded and it's back, so we didn't get a full stream drop. Anyway, um, yeah, chat's confirming everything's good. So that may have been the broadcast software. All right, to your point, let's see. I lost my train of thought. We were talking about
360 reviews and
360s.
peer
Yeah,
reviews and work performance. Yeah.
yeah, and you said your company has them, but just
We're
started.
just we just changed our whole system. Like
Okay,
literally we just started having to fill out the reviews and starting our new process now. So hopefully we have shorter feedback loops, which is going to be great.
okay.
I think for
So,
growth.
uh, one thing you can do, you know, you don't have to wait for a review to get 360 feedback on yourself. We've talked about this in a how to take feedback well session, I think, that I may have done. But um, what you can do is give people social permission. And so you can say, hey, I'm really trying to do this, or my goal is that.
Hmm.
For example, I'm trying to be more data driven. I'm trying to be more specific about the data that backs up my points. I'd appreciate it if after meetings, you would give me um, you know, you'd give me some feedback on that, or if you see me
Hmm.
making you know, unsupported assertions, that you call me on it. Maybe not in public, but
Hmm.
just tell me after. And if you give
Yeah.
people what I call, because uh, if you don't give people social permission, they're afraid that they'll damage their relationship with you or hurt your feelings, or that it's
Hmm.
just not their place to
Right.
tell you. But you're very open to feedback. You crave it. And so just letting people know
Hmm.
that. And I don't think you would have this problem, but for chat and for the viewers, I say all the time, um, if someone offers you feedback, you have to just say thank you. You can't argue with it. You might be able to ask clarifying questions like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
sorry you see it that way. This is kind of how I see it. You know, can you help me understand? But if you, I had a woman, I've told this story, she asked me for feedback. So I thought, okay, I'll tell you what I think. I was polite, but I told her a problem area, and she immediately started arguing with me. So of course my conclusion was like, wow, we have like three problems here. Number one, I still believe you have this problem. Number two, it's clear you don't believe you have this problem. Number three, when you ask for feedback, you don't listen. Like
I want it.
you just train wrecked, you know.
Yeah.
Like you just, we'd have both been happier if she never had the conversation. So chat says here, yeah, after meeting feedback is a good idea, and I'm completely into that. So if you're trying to like become more disciplined or become more data driven, just get somebody to be. You mentioned before the stream
Hmm.
religion. In religion, they would call it an accountability partner,
Hmm.
right? Like you know, this is
I
your
was just gonna
person.
say accountability. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and I was going to say on discipline, by the way, I don't love discipline either necessarily, but I am very disciplined about some things. And part of it is just deciding it's your choice.
Mhm.
Like if um, my
Right.
wife and others would be the first to say, I rebel instantly against things being forced on me, but if I choose them, I can be very disciplined.
Hmm.
And so making it your own choice is different, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Chad didn't have too many other things to say about data driven. Let me just read them off. Here's a good example. If you want to implement cultural changes to improve client relationships, you can measure the impact with client satisfaction surveys. So it's all about different
Hmm.
ways to. Soft skills can't be like precisely measured, but they can be measured. Um,
Yeah. It's a
and
lot of
act,
qualitative data.
yeah, like I mean, you can try to. You know, someone else said net promoter score. If you know net promoter score at all, That's if you have a public
Okay.
facing. Net promoter score is basically the people who would promote your product minus the people who would recommend against your product. Um, and so
Mm.
net promoter score is like if you take, say, Coke, and 80 people like Coke, but and 10 people are neutral and 10 people hate it, you'd subtract the 10 that hate it from the 80 that like it and say their NPS is 70.
Hmm.
Um, so that's a very popular measurement at this point. Let's see. Some questions I found to be helpful for getting more feedback. What am I doing especially well that I should do more of? What am I doing that I should stop doing? Yeah. So, and being vulnerable like that there's like a bonus to this. It will endear you to people anyway because they feel like they've been consulted.
Yeah.
So you're getting a
Hmm.
win-win.
Yeah. Yeah, and I genuinely like want to hear the feedback. And of course I don't want to hear like crummy things about me, but that would suck. But like I'd rather know and fix it than be
Yeah.
blinded to it. Yeah.
Uh, um, so I think that's exactly. Uh, I tell people, look, your problem areas, you do want to be aware of them, because if nothing else, you can set people's expectations. So I know you watched the show with Mugendra, and I was talking to him about how if you tell people I'm going to give you, to lead the team quickly, sometimes I'm going to discuss examples publicly. You can set people's expectations. So I sometimes
Yeah.
set people's expectations and say, look, I'm big and I'm loud. And I try not to let that influence things. But if I'm big and loud around you, just please
Hmm.
understand that is a little bit, I am big and I can't get smaller and I do speak loudly. But if it bothers you, let me know. And so but once people's
Has
expectations are
anyone
set,
ever said it bothers them? Has
only,
anyone ever admitted that to you or asked you?
uh, I have gotten
Can you just be a
advice.
little shorter?
Well, I've gotten the advice secondhand. The funny story there is you don't see it when I sit here, but I'm 6'2", and a little bit of change. And in an early job, I was wearing cowboy boots, and the word came back to me that someone had said, um, has anyone told Ethan that the point of wearing boots is to look taller, and like that isn't really what he needs? So I think it came indirectly. So,
That's
yeah.
funny.
I've also gotten the advice. Actually, when I feel I may be threatening someone or I get that impression, I drop below their eye level. So I sit down, I crouch down, I'll even sit on the floor if I really need to change the power dynamic. So I've only done that occasionally, but
Wow.
it's actually super dramatic. What effect that has. So,
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
right.
that's interesting.
So what should we
Cool.
do for homework? What would you like to do
I
between
don't
now and the
know.
next time?
I feel like Makindra's homework was pretty tough, so I don't know. I'm like kind of preparing to, you know,
Well,
I
so
don't know,
his wasn't that hard. I sent him to work to try talking to his team to set expectations and
to pilot.
to
You
pilot.
said
Yeah.
to pick a team to pilot. That's like a lot of work to plan that, even just a little pilot, I think.
Well, he's an executive. He wants to be
Yeah,
like he wants
that's
to be high
right.
performance in that way. So, yeah, well, so you should probably go test something in your workplace.
Hmm.
What change would you most like to make?
Um, I mean, I definitely want to do, it's really important to me that I'm making that space for other people. So I think being more intentional about that is important. Um, and like practicing not having to always speak up is
Okay.
probably a good thing. Like I said, I've been kind of doing that a little bit, but I think I could be a little more intentional. I know I'd like something that I could gauge so
Okay.
that over the next 4 weeks
Yeah.
before we talk, I can have to tell you honestly whether or not I've
All
accomplished
right.
something
So I
like
have
that.
this for you. So there's a book that you don't need to read called The Leader Habit by a guy named Martin Lanik. And I bring it up so if anybody wants to know about it, they can go look up more about it. But he's done a ton of research. He's a professor in Colorado, and he's done a ton of research that basically shows that to learn a new habit, you have to practice it 60 times, but it can be as little as 5 minutes a day. And so you can actually keep score and just test just one time a day. Can you realize that you want to speak and then wait at least 5 minutes to see if someone else basically says what you were going to say? And that's a 5 minute exercise once a day. If it's 4 weeks until we talk again, it'll only be 20
Mm-hmm.
times. So we can keep score out
Okay.
of 20. And I will tell you, I have a loyal follower and helper here in chat, Racine, who takes notes on these sessions so that I can look back at them and know what I coached on. So now you have your
Mm-hmm.
accountability. She'll end up writing
Okay.
down that I ask you to do this and that we're going to check in on your score. How many out of 20 did you wait the 5 minutes? And if you're anything like me, there'll be no shortage of times a day you want to speak up. So, and I think you're actually very like me in that way.
All
So,
right.
see, this
Challenge
is
accepted.
all right. Fantastic. So there's your homework. Yeah. So for chat, funny thing, when I was going back and forth with Kristin, she politely said, having watched a couple of my other coaching streams, she said, "Well, how would you feel about me being more interactive?" Translation: Ethan, you talk a lot, and I'd like to say something myself. And she's right. She's right. And this has been way more interactive. So
Maybe the
awesome.
translation was I talk too much. That's what the translation was, a warning.
A
Hey.
warning. Yeah. I take it on
Yeah.
myself. That's all. So we'll wrap up for now, but let me run the stream through some fun stuff. So first, thanks everybody. But I want to pop up here. Let me see if I can pull this off. I have some windows ready to go before I pull them up. All right. So at the end of August, assuming the date doesn't move, and this is going to show up over my face, just live with it. Um, we're going to have a special guest on the show, Lou Castle. So you can read a little bit about Lou Castle here, but here's the headline. He works at Amazon now. He's one of the members in my organization, Amazon Games, works in an adjacent part of the organization. He co-founded Westwood Studios, and he's built and shipped over 150 different games, including the majority of the Command and Conquer series, and as well as all this other stuff you can read about. So Lou's awesome. I'm really excited to bring him on the show because here's a guy who went to school and double majored in art and computer science, which is super different, obviously. And then he worked, among other roles he held, he's been a CEO. He was also CFO of one of the studios he worked at. He worked at EA after Westwood was acquired. He created, in what's many ways the predecessor to Angry Birds in Boom Blocks and Boom Blocks Bash Party. Some of you know it, but here's all the stuff on Command and Conquer. So it's going to be a month till he's on the show, but I want to give you guys a big heads up. That's August 27th is when Lou will be on the Easy Coach. And we're going to talk about all the games he's built. We're going to talk about his career. So I'll drop that off the screen. But I'm super excited about that. And yeah, a lot of people played that as a kid. And there's a lot of fans of it. The other thing I'll say is my next show, I'm headed out on family vacation, which I'm super happy about. It's summer. So we'll have both Kristin and Mugendra back on towards the end of August. But between now and then, on August 15th, I'm going to do my next show on overcoming mistakes and setbacks. And so I'm going to share some of the things I've screwed up. And I'm also going to publish an article. A lot of people follow me here. We'll put it out on all my social channels, but it will be hosted probably on both my blog and on LinkedIn. And that'll be an article on what I call asymmetric consequences, which is very polysyllabic. I feel good that I went to the thesaurus and came up with those words. Asymmetric consequences, I'm going to explore a little bit, but it's the idea that you can do something either right or wrong, good or bad in your life, in a few minutes that can have years or decades of consequences. And sometimes those are predictable, sometimes they're not. The ones that aren't predictable is too bad. The ones that are, though, are important to plan for. So that's just a quick look into the future. Everyone knows, follow us, and it's come up in chat. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 YouTube followers. So if you haven't done that, follow us on YouTube. But and by the way, we're super pleased. We're 1,200 and some followers here on Twitch. Kristin, you've been a fabulous guest. I love the fact you were here. I love your transparency. And I'm really looking forward to working with you. As I told Mugendra, if you have any questions in the next week, feel free to shoot them to me. I do recognize that a month is a long time to go. And so if you need guidance in the middle or any reinforcement, I'm always happy to do that. So with that, chat, thank you so much. And I'll see you back on August 15th for that show. And in the meantime, go set the world on fire and don't get caught. No, do good things is what I mean. All right. See you later. Good night.